Hey, welcome back to Business 101, Introduction to Business. This is our sixth and last lecture in this module number 3, looking at content from chapter 3 of the text. As you can tell from this title slide, we're looking at the topic of entrepreneurism. Entrepreneurism is a topic that is near and dear to my heart. When I'm not teaching here at College of Marin, I have an active consulting practice with startups and early stage ventures, not only here in Northern California, but also in other parts around the country, the Midwest, Missouri, Minnesota, Wisconsin, and other parts around the country. I actually teach the entrepreneurism class here at College of Marin from time to time, and I've taught entrepreneurism at state universities as well as private universities for a couple of years now. So I'm familiar with the topic, and this brief overview is not intended as a replacement or even a dilution of any of those larger classes, but simply to give you sort of an introductory flavor for what entrepreneurism is, especially within the context of this class, an introduction to business. What is entrepreneurship? Entrepreneurship involves an entrepreneur. Who's an entrepreneur? A business person who accepts both the risks and the opportunities involved in creating and operating a new business venture. Entrepreneurship then is the process of seeking business opportunities under extraordinary conditions of risk. You're starting a business that hasn't existed before. You many times are trying to do something that has never been done before and that certainly you've not done before. And so it has extraordinary levels of uncertainty and risk, and even given that, you want to leave the safety of working for another company and start your own business. Then what are some characteristics of typical entrepreneurs? Well, there is of course a strong sense of independence, a strong burning desire to be your own boss and be the captain of your own destiny. It requires a very high degree of courage to deal with uncertainty and risk, sometimes extraordinary levels of uncertainty and risk. Most entrepreneurs have a very strong personal bias towards action, towards doing, towards getting it done, which leads to necessary high levels of resourcefulness and a very high degree of being stubborn in the face of adversity. Because when you're starting a company, there's more than enough adversity to go around. What are you going to do when things get tough? Successful entrepreneurs have a high degree of perseverance and stubbornness in the face of adversity. What entrepreneurs need to try to figure out, sometimes very quickly, how are you different and better than others already in the marketplace, if there are others in the marketplace. This is, of course, if you're entering into an established market, one in which there are already many firms competing according to relatively well-defined criteria. For instance, there are already major players selling smartphones in the marketplace, right? Apple, Samsung, lots of different companies selling smartphones. And if you're going to create a brand new smartphone to try to enter into that market, one of the first questions that you need to answer, how are you different and better than any of the other choices that a buyer will have in the marketplace? Sometimes the answer is to create and find a niche, a segment of a market that is not currently really being exploited. In particular types of marketplaces, there are many times dominant products which address the lion's share of buyers, but there's still a distinct group of buyers that need and want something that's not currently offered, and that may be an opportunity for you to enter in with a new business. That, of course, is different than if you're going into a brand new place for the first time. And that's where sometimes a company can simply take advantage of first mover advantages. What's a first mover advantage? Any advantage that comes to a firm because it exploits an opportunity before any other firm does. For instance, if you are the first popular all-electric vehicle who is catering to the ultra high-end luxury market, well, you will have first mover advantage if you're the first one in the marketplace. The same is true, for instance, if you are the very first person to introduce widespread, for instance, just coming up with something here, coffee that does not have any jitters associated with the caffeine, that you've discovered a way to give caffeine and that energy boost to people in a warm cup of coffee, and yet it doesn't, over prolonged consumption, doesn't have any of the jitters associated with being over caffeinated, that you would be the first one in the marketplace in a big way. You might be able to exploit first mover advantages. One of the tricks, of course, the real challenges in starting a small business, starting an entrepreneurial business, is getting capital, getting financing, getting money to pay for all the things and buy for all the things you need in order to start a business. And entrepreneurship leans on a lot of different sources for financing. Everything from your own personal resources, maxing out and taking cash advances on your credit cards, to getting loans from family and friends, to bank loans, venture capital companies, small business investment companies. There's a whole collection. There's a whole collection of possible sources that entrepreneurs try to leverage and take advantage of in order to get the capital they need to get to work. And finally, in the larger levels, of course, there may be venture capital involved. We've talked about that, heard about the lore of that with big tech companies like Google and Facebook, and when they were very young and very early on in their lifespan, how they went to venture capitalists in Silicon Valley in order to obtain funding. That's certainly a source of funding for some entrepreneurial firms, and others will turn to somebody else, like a small business investment company, a government-regulated investment company that borrows money from the Small Business Administration to invest in or lend to a small business. If you're not a high-tech startup, perhaps you just want to open up a car wash or a laundry or a donut shop. You may not be looking to a venture capitalist. You may instead be looking to a small business investment company to obtain financing to get started. Well, this is, of course, just a brief overview of entrepreneurism. What are some reasons why new startup companies fail? Well, the dominant reasons why entrepreneurial startup firms fail, you see them there. Managerial incompetence or inexperience. Just having a great idea doesn't mean that you have the tools and skills to manage a company. Or neglecting certain aspects of the company that really should need attention, but because you don't have the experience or the expertise, you neglect those areas. One of the common areas where many times firms fail is with that small little department called customer service. Maybe you do a great job at the job you do, the product or service you provide, and you're really a genius when it comes to great ideas, but when it comes to the nuts and bolts of treating customers like customers, you just don't have anybody who knows how to really do that well. And if you tick off enough customers, well, you don't have a company. There are also other reasons why startups fail: weak control systems, insufficient capital, or really the real clue behind insufficient capital is you simply burn through unwisely the capital that you actually have. And so you blow it, you waste it, rather than being very frugal on how you manage your expenses. But reasons for success. Well, the reasons why startups succeed: hard work, drive, dedication. You are at the right place with a real significant market demand for the product or services you're providing. Your managerial competence is very, very high. You know how to manage a small business, or quite frankly, there's always with startups when they succeed, there's a high degree of luck involved as well. These are just some of the factors involved when we look at the life of entrepreneurism. If this is something that has sort of piqued your interest, if you have curiosity about entrepreneurism, my real recommendation to you would be to keep that in the back of your head, to enroll in a course on entrepreneurism. I've taught many of them, And they can be a real wonderful introduction for folks who have really just a passing interest in entrepreneurism, to get your hands dirty, to see what it really feels like to start a company and to deal with some of the real interesting challenges, uncertainty, and risk in starting a new venture. It can be a wonderful experience, even if you don't end up going to work in a startup, just to have the experience and know what it's like to work in a startup. So keep that in mind. Perhaps the opportunity will come up in your near future to join an Entrepreneurism class. Nevertheless, this is part of the larger expanse of our topic in Chapter 3 of the text: business ownership, different modes of ownership, small business, and of course, in this last lecture, an introduction to the topic of entrepreneurism. This concludes our video lectures in Module 3, dealing with content from Chapter 3 of the textbook. Thanks so much for your attention in this module. We'll see you in Module 4.